But first and foremost, we'll go ahead and kick it off. I wanted to give a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us here today on our inaugural events webinar for Venture Portland's first ever webinar event-specific series. So it's very exciting to be here today. Just a quick housekeeping note that if you have any questions, which we encourage you to have throughout the presentation, to just go ahead and either raise your hand, go ahead and use that feature, or just go ahead and put it in the chat. Either way, we will make sure that you're taken care of and answered to. I did pepper in some fun interactive pieces throughout the webinar to hopefully keep you on the edge of your seat. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and kick us off here with, again, our first inaugural webinar for Events Specifically. All right, here we are. We are thrilled to be launching our new Events Hub, which is going to be a resource and perk for members to ask questions and gain support all things events. The Events Hub was made possible through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, Prosper Portland, so thank you to them, and hours of advocacy. And I just wanted to take a moment here today, as I know so many of you in the audience, just looking at some familiar faces, were part of that advocacy and those many, many hours of advocating for this specific resource. So I just wanted to give a very warm and heartfelt thank you to all of you for making this a reality. And I wanted to also introduce the Events Hub team, as we are incredibly grateful, excited, and inspired to be here with you today. So I'll go ahead and kick us off. My name is Mackenzie Malone, and I am our events director. I joined Venture Portland on the 1st of December, so I just celebrated my 2-month anniversary. I'm very happy to be here. Kind of really incredible to be able to have this opportunity to build a new program from the ground up. And Gabby, our amazing events assistant, who we'll hear from shortly, she just joined about 3 weeks ago. So the dynamic duo is hard at work as we prepare for the launch of our Events Hub. A little bit more background about myself. I am a true native Oregonian, grew up right here in Portland. I spent the first half of my life over in between neighborhoods of the Selwood District and the Woodstock District, which was wonderful, and recently established roots by buying a house over in the Foster District, which I absolutely love. And cheers to all of you who have helped make Foster the district that it is today. It's just absolutely wonderful. Shortly after I graduated school down at Linfield University, I spent some time down in Florida working for the mouse himself. He kind of taught me most everything I know. I like to kind of give credit to the mouse, especially as it relates to hospitality, event planning, and really putting on that big show, which is what we talk about a lot during events. Shortly after, I moved home and worked for the Portland Trail Blazers, Go Blazers, in their corporate partnership marketing department, where I had an opportunity to put on major events for our clients while also partnering with the team itself, which was really incredible. I then worked for the Washington Nationals, which is the Major League Baseball team over in DC. And I know most of you don't necessarily know me very well yet, but it is kind of ironic, I will share with you, that I kind of spent some time in professional sports given my theater background. But really for me, it's just about putting on a different costume per se, if you will. And it's all about the theater, all about the show. So after spending some time in DC, I was really ultimately called back to the Portland area, not only because my family and friends were located here, but really because of that unique community that the city of Portland provides, especially in the unique individual business districts that we all represent and celebrate here today. I like to think that I kind of bring my big box brand energy into kind of these smaller entrepreneurial forces. So it's an absolute honor to be here with you today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gabby, our wonderful events assistant. Gabby, if you'd like to share a few words.
Well, thanks for that introduction. Mackenzie is an inspiration and an amazing leader. Like she said, I'm Gabby. I'm the new events assistant. I was hired at the beginning of January, so I am very fresh to Venture Portland, but have been encouraged to jump into the deep end and have enjoyed everything that I've been learning so far. Prior to this, I was originally from Chicago area, so I grew up in a very loud theatrical family, and then decided to move out here because of Lewis and Clark College. And after I saw the nature and all of the trees in everybody's backyard, I was kind of hooked on that element. And shortly after graduating, I joined Portland Parks and Rec's outdoor education team, where I was mostly in charge of leading field trips and designing these mini events for school children and all the way through high school. And after I worked for Portland Parks and Rec, I really got to love different areas of Portland, and soon found myself working in the Northwest community in an upcoming area called Slabtown. And Slabtown has a bunch of new properties, some great restaurants, but not a ton of community engagement yet. So the Slabtown Outdoor Market, which launched last year, was one of the first projects that started over there. And me and my boss at that time really built it from the ground up. And we learned a lot about how to run successful events and some tips and tricks to keep you out of trouble. But really, now that I'm here in Venture Portland, I'm just excited to engage in these different business districts and getting to know all of you that have so many wonderful ideas, but might need some assistance facilitating them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gabby. It's just so great to hear from you. And we're so happy, both Gabby and myself, to serve the community here. So today we're going to be going over a very high level overview of events, but also introducing a beneficial system that will kickstart you in the process of initiating your events. So before we really get started, I'd love to start with an icebreaker conversation. And in the chat, I'd love to hear your either favorite current Portland event, or if it's something that's happened in the past, I'd love to know what that is. So if you'd like to go ahead and chime in and share your favorite Portland event, that would be great to kick us off. Oh, fellow Mouse alum here, Aiden. We'll have to talk about that offline. That sounds like fun. Always good to learn about some fun and new Disney folks. Crafty Wonderland, yes. Jeff Burger Week, I love that. Especially with Dumpling Week happening right now. How fun. Very cool. Let's see here. St. John's Bazaar, yes. The Portland Marathon and Half Marathon, yes. And Feast, yes. I love that they were able to make that into kind of a more digital iteration, and hopefully we'll be back in full swing here this year. Looking forward to the Winter Flight Festival. Yes, that's coming up here just right around the corner. And what's really neat about that one this year is that it's not just very centralized in kind of the downtown area. They have different activations in each of the neighborhood districts, which I think is just so wonderful. Mardi Gras, Kenton Street Fair. Wow, we are getting so many. I love that. The Music Fest Northwest at the waterfront. Oh my gosh, we could just go on and on. My goodness, the Cathedral Park Jazz Festival. Just to kind of segue, now is the perfect time to start thinking about your spring and summer events, especially as we're talking about some of these ones that are coming up here, gearing up to happen. And I'd love to kind of give the mic over to Jacob, our Director of Member Services and Communications, to share about our current spring and summer grant cycle that's happening right now that might actually parlay into your next great event or activation idea. Jacob, if you wouldn't mind just taking it away.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Hey, everybody. I am Jacob Falkenberg, and I manage Venture Portland's grants program. And we would love to fund your spring or summertime event. And if you don't know, we currently have our spring grant applications available for potential events that your district is thinking about putting on. So we, during the pandemic, we kind of put our events grants on hold for a bit, since that wasn't really possible, and had districts focusing more on maintaining their staff and building out some of the infrastructure in those districts. But now the events grants are back in full effect, and we're definitely encouraging people to apply for them. We've simplified the application process significantly. So if you haven't applied for a Venture Portland grant for a couple of years, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see how the application has been shortened, simplified. The process is a lot quicker than it once was. So we're trying to remove a lot of the barriers that we had previously had in the program. So our events and marketing grants are available for up to $4,000 for member business districts. And those are for events April 1st through October 1st, 2022. So anything you can dream of over the next couple of months, they are valid for. So this is anything from a community event to an advertising and marketing campaign, passport promotions, even district merchandise, if you're looking at selling some merch for your districts. But today we're really going to be focusing on community events. How can you attract customers to your district? How can you provide a benefit for the businesses in your district, and really make your district a destination over the summer? We also have district enhancement grants available. Those are for up to $6,000, and those are for more of the infrastructure projects that we were seeing during the pandemic. You know, your street plazas, your outdoor dining areas, public art, benches, bike racks, street trees, even cleanups and lighting and trash cans and those sorts of things. And then you can also apply for a grant for staffing. So if your district has a staffer and you'd like to apply for funds to help pay their salary during that April through October period, you can apply for up to $4,000 to do so with those grants. You can only pick one though, so definitely start working with your boards right now to kind of figure out what's best and most needed for your district, and reach out to me as soon as possible to start discussing the project. I'm available for project planning and grant writing assistance now through the grant deadline, which is March 4th at noon. So definitely coming up quick. You've got just over a month to get those applications in. They're available on our website, or feel free to reach out to me and I can send you a copy as well. But definitely don't wait to the last minute, because there are specific things, even though we've simplified the applications, there are some specific things that you will need to provide in order to have an eligible application. So look forward to funding all your events. And without further ado, I'm going to kick it back to Mackenzie to hopefully give you some ideas and inspiration around those events.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacob. That was a wonderful spiel. And I know also too, next week at the start of our webinar, we're going to kind of go into a little bit more depth on each of those. So if anyone has any questions, to Jacob's point, feel free to reach out. We are here as a resource to help you and help set you up for success for not only your events, but for beyond. So something to think about there. Okay, I'm very curious, and something that I'd like to do is to get an events pulse check, even just the thought about events right now in your mind. And I know COVID is a really, really big and serious issue, and so I'm not trying to take that away from us, but let's kind of share some things maybe that are on our minds when we're thinking about events, or, you know, concerns, thoughts, things that we're excited about are always welcome to be shared. But in the chat, I invite you to kind of just give us a pulse check as to how you might be feeling, and we can kind of share some commentary around that. How are we feeling? If we were to say, hey, careful, yes, Bridget, absolutely. We're being very cautious, cautiously optimistic, I hope, but being very careful. Yes, Aiden, my fellow Mouseketeer. You stole the words right out of my mouth. I love that. Conflicted, yeah, absolutely. Miss them, of course. Yes, Gabby, we are here. We are here to do that. Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing those great things. Excited, yes, Nana. And Nana, you've done a great job at planning some awesome different mixers and events over in the Gateway District, so thank you for that. Well, this is really helpful, kind of, along the same lines of what I was thinking is really kind of some of these things of being conflicted, wanting to do them, but not necessarily knowing how. All of these things are very, very relevant, and something to think about. All right. I wanted to share the next slide here is I wanted to share a quote, a favorite quote of mine. Now, this can relate to events, it can relate to your personal life, your professional life, but I thought I would love to be able to highlight this quote. So I'll go ahead and read it here for us today. I never win or lose. I either win or learn. And I think that's really important and speaks volumes to how we're kind of all navigating this time over the last couple of years, is really being able to learn what we can and cannot do. And, with what we can't do, how can we pivot? How can we still host events, whether they be virtual? I would love to be sitting in the room with all 20 plus of you here today, but isn't it amazing as kind of this silver lining byproduct that we can still host community gatherings, even if it is just digital, which still holds an impact and something that's important to our community. Thinking about a little bit about the icebreaker question, I'm curious if people want to go ahead and put into the chat, what are some of those positive impacts that you saw, whether it be for your business, for your district, or really the greater city of Portland? What are some of those positive impacts that you saw because you hosted events or because you attempted to host an event? I'd be very curious to hear what people's kind of impact that they experienced was. Give everyone a quick second here. Inspiration and connection. Yes, community connections. People looking out for one another. Yes, absolutely. Increased revenue, positive economic impact. Yes. Connect with new stakeholders. Thank you, Rich. Yes, community engagement and connection. So I think we're all kind of hearing this sense of community is really what I'm hearing, is this sense of connections. And yes, smiles, good memories. I love that, Gabby. It is so nice to be able to connect with one another. And even one of our humanistic kind of fundamental things that we need is community and the sense of self within that community. So I think that that's so important in conjunction to some of these other things that we're seeing of networking and good memories and just being able to connect with others that maybe we haven't been able to connect with before. So those are all really great points. Thank you for sharing and being so engaged in the webinar here so far. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So next here, we are going to go over our event brief. And one other question I have, I know I forewarned you that there might be some interactive pieces, so thank you again for being so interactive. But a question I have for you, does anyone know what the 5 W's are? If I were to say that to you right now, the 5 W's as it relates to event planning. Any guesses out there? There's also an H, if you will, sometimes an H, or always an H as to what goes along with these 5 W's. But anyone want to be able to share? Let's see, who, what, where, when, how. Wow, love it. Everyone is there. And why? Yes. Absolutely. So an event brief, although it sounds a little bit fancy, is really just an elevated version of those who, what, where, when, and why staples. Yes, the big why, Nana from Gateway, absolutely. Something to really think about, events are something that I know, I think I know that I should put on, but really what's my why? What's my why ever is really just a great rule of thumb for really doing anything at all. But yes, so we are going to go over what entails an event brief. So really kind of diving into those other reasons, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And a great place to start for events, if you're kind of stumped over there and you don't necessarily know where to begin, is thinking about all of those different events that everyone just contributed for their favorite event in Portland. Not to say that copying is the way to go, but it's a great place to start. Emulation is the highest form of flattery. And if you're really stumped about what kind of event to put on, emulation can kind of kick you off in the right direction. So something to think about, so many people put feast, put the St. John's Jazz Festival. So really kind of be thinking about some of these examples as we go through this exercise, which will not only benefit you here in the audience today, but also really be able to benefit you independently when you do this individual work for your event. So something to keep in mind. So we'll go ahead and start with event purpose. Why are we doing this event? What's our why behind the event? Something that I like to think about when I'm thinking of our goal for an event is I like to use SMART goals. And we'll go into kind of a little bit more detail as to what each one of these letters as part of this acronym mean. But I just wanted to read it aloud here today. So be specific. Sometimes, or a lot of the time, we have a goal of, hey, I want a lot of people to attend, right? But sometimes what we need to do is really just that more concrete number is, yes, I want a lot of people to attend, but specifically, I want 50 people to attend. That is my specific goal for the event purpose, is to be able to include new people. And I know some people said, one of the things that events do a great job about is connecting those folks, either like-minded individuals and or businesses. So be really hyper specific. I want to connect with XYZ business as part of the fruition of this event. So specificity is very important. The next letter of this acronym is measurable. What kind of tools are you using in order to make this event measurable? Maybe it's spreadsheets. Maybe it's a number of attendees. Maybe it's conversions of people that buy a specific product or who are introduced to your product who may not have known about you. So be measurable. And also too, if something isn't quite working with the data, be sure that it's okay to go back and create new measurable tactics in order to measure out your goals and your outcomes. So just be mindful of that. Attainable. This is one of my favorites. Gabby and I consider ourselves to be dreamers. I like to shoot for the moon and land amongst the stars, which is great in a lot of ways, but make sure that your goals are actually attainable. Just given your idea for your event and what you're trying to accomplish, having goals that are attainable will not only feel really good, but make things happen. So making sure that goals are attainable. And for R, making sure that they are relevant. Is this purpose aligned with your mission and values and ethos for your brand? Just something to think about, but let's always make sure that they're relevant. And then last but not least, make sure that they're time-based. So if you have, for say, an event coming up in 3 weeks, how are you going to spend the next 3 weeks gearing yourself up for success for that event? Knowing that the actual deadline for the event is in 3 weeks, how are you going to set yourself up for that success for the specific event? And that's kind of the general overview of SMART goals. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we move on to the next component of the event brief? No questions. Okay, everyone's feeling good. That's what we like to hear. Next is that we want to think about our target audience. So who would we like to invite? Who are we trying to attract to our event? And what gets them excited? Not every style of event, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go into event formatting, but not every event is for everyone. So you want to really be thinking about who your target audience is and who specifically that is will relate heavily into your marketing, and we'll kind of go into marketing promotion as we get further down the line. But another thing to consider is how can you represent the unique personality of your business or district to this specific group. And really, I'll give you just a little hint here, is that it's really all about the experience. The bread and butter here is all about the experience and how you can make your event unique and special to that specific group. Some things to consider when thinking about your target audience, also known as your target market. Sometimes those terms can be interchangeable. So something to keep in mind, if you hear the word target market, it also can be known as your target audience. So something to think about there. Any questions before we head on to the next slide? Okay. All right. One of the biggest considerations is our budget. What is your budget for the event? What existing resources can you use that you already have in your back pocket that you can utilize for your budget? Meaning, maybe you already have items that you can use towards this specific event. And even better, maybe you can make partnerships or have existing partnerships with people within your community to help offset some of those costs. Thinking about budget and some of those big ticket items, your venue, your food, your speakers, the folks that you have, if not volunteers, who is working your event. And I'm actually going to invite Gabby up to speak a little bit more about some of those hidden event fees that we don't always think about, but that are very, very critical to be considering when putting on an event. So Gabby, I'd love to invite you to the stage to talk a little bit about those hidden event fees that we may not want to think about, but are very important, especially for the day of.
Absolutely. So Mackenzie mentioned all those bigger items, but it's always important to have a reserve in your budget for miscellaneous costs and day of operations costs. Miscellaneous costs would be something like office supplies, or printing costs, if you're going to be hanging flyers. And then in terms of your day of operations costs, you always want to make sure that you have considered every player. So if you're at a venue like a restaurant or a brewery, you're going to want to make sure gratuity is thought about ahead of time so that the waiter doesn't feel forgotten about. They're going to be a part of the community element too. Valets are going to, you're going to always want to keep thinking about who is involved and how can we make sure they're feeling appreciated. Similarly, if a vendor has a resource need, power generators or power cords, those things are, again, they're not going to break your budget, but if you don't have money at the end and you've spent it all, it's going to become infinitely more complicated than if you had the little 10% left over for other expenses. And then the last one would just be like any day of operations things that could go wrong. So even if you're having a digital event, what sort of backup things do you want to have? I already mentioned a generator, but for a street fair, it's always great to have, extra table, extra chairs, like these things that when you're running the show, it takes away from the experience if you're also trying to head to Target or borrow from a neighbor. So it's always good to get your big tickets taken care of, but then make sure that you're thinking about like 5% to 10% of your budget being just whatever happens to put out the fire.
Yes, absolutely. That is very important. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of fellow event folks in the audience nodding their head as yes, that is something important to be thinking about. Thank you so much, Gabby, for keeping those things top of mind and something for us to consider, as it is so vital when putting on events. So Before we kind of get going on the rest of the event brief overview, I did want to go ahead and do an exercise. So I invite everyone in the group here to go ahead and take out a pen and paper, or make a note in your computer or something, but have access to writing information down. And if you were here last week, Jacob led a great webinar about running effective meetings and board recruitment. So thinking back to that webinar, there might actually be some overlap here. But what I'd like you to do on this piece of paper is I'd like you to think about, if you were planning an event today and the event itself, as far as the theme or the format or any of those things, doesn't necessarily matter. But if you were planning an event today, who would you invite? And what are some of those low-hanging fruit that you feel as though that you can, what kind of groups do you feel as though you can ask upon to rely to have them come to your event? So why don't we take a couple of moments to just jot that down. And then if there's anyone in the audience who would like to share, I would love for you to either raise your hand or put a smiley face in the chat. And yes, bonus points if you were here last week, because I think that there might be some overlap of people that you can be thinking for your board recruitment. All right, just giving, I see some people still scribbling in their notepads, so I want to make sure everyone gets just a moment of time here. So great to see everyone's faces. All right, anyone brave enough to put a smiley face in the chat of someone who might want to share who they're thinking of within their community? Everyone's still thinking. This is the reason why, right? It's not because people don't want to share. All right, Liz, yes, absolutely, over in St. John's. I would love to hear what kind of folks you have listed on your list that you've been working on.
Great, thank you so much. And I was thinking, first I started off with residents, like, the residents of our community, but then I thought like a sub audience that I would really want to attract are new residents. Like people that I want to, welcome into the community, and somehow, thinking that I'm a business association, I want to introduce them to all the great resources we have right here so that they know. So that's what I was kind of thinking. And then my other sub audience was not only people from our neighborhood, but from nearby neighborhoods, so they're adjacent to St. John's, but maybe not necessarily in the exact neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great things. And I think, I'm not sure if it was another webinar that you were leading, Liz, but someone was recently talking about all those kind of new apartment or living solutions where those apartment folks are, interested in joining the community and may not know about different things that are happening, and what a great fresh set of folks to be able to market to. So I love kind of the community existing, but also the future community component. That's a great point, Liz. Thank you. Perfect. All right. It looks like we have a couple of other folks who'd like to share. We'll go ahead and pass it over to Christian.
Well, you talked about low-hanging fruit. And so for me, the low-hanging fruit would be my coworkers.
Yay! That's us.
And my board members.
Absolutely.
Getting buy-in from the people that are closest to you that are also working on similar projects, I think is really important and stuff. And it's a great way to exchange ideas. I'm planning on attending, I know Nana's got a mixer next week. I want to go to that and see how that goes, and see if there's anything I can learn from that from when I plan my own mixer coming up this month. So
yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity for resource sharing there.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And, we talked a little earlier about emulation. And so kind of going to these events and learning best practices, like, hey, that turned out really well. That's something that I want to implement for my event. I think that that's a wonderful point, Christian. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, last but not least, Nana. Oh, and Rich, we have so many people. I think we'll kind of go ahead and cut it off here after Rich for this particular question. But Nana, I'll let you go ahead and take the stage and take it away.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking more like community advocates that are leaders within the district. So East Portland Neighborhood Association, I know Civic Life, they have a lot of representatives there that work within the community, Prosper Portland. And also, you know, the business owners that are in the community and doing small projects and that are already actively involved.
Yeah, absolutely. That may just a great point. And it's amazing how we have, you know, so many people speak and still countless people that we can call upon. So I hope everyone's taking some good notes because these are great things to think about when planning your event. Thank you so much, Nana. Those are excellent, excellent points. Rich, I'll go ahead and pass the baton over your way. Last but not least.
Thanks, Mackenzie. And Christian, thanks for referring to us as a group. I was thinking about that, and then I thought, I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but you know, like I said the other day, it's okay to prime the pump. I sat in and watched a little bit of a city council meeting this morning just because, you know, Bud Clark passed yesterday, and I knew that they would be saying some words about that. And I was just watching some of the people log in and speak, and I would go straight to the city government. If we really wanted to put something together, I would invite the mayor and all of the commissioners, and if we had any individual legitimate contacts, I would try to exploit those. Exploit is not the right word.
Invite them is great. I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Rich, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have something else you wanted to share?
That was about it.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I mean, talk about the power of community. I mean, I just had a couple of things listed, but there's countless opportunities and pools of people to be able to market to, which is just so important. And even just from a short little list that we've talked with folks today, I mean, just the countless folks that you can look to invite to your event. All right. All right, heading on to more pieces to our event brief journey. So we have our event format, which is up next, and this is really setting the stage. So really kind of determining after envisioning, you know, who's going to be attending, to what budget you're going to have, and really creating those goals. It's a matter of what kind of event are you having? And I know that earlier I mentioned too that not every event is right for that group of people. So really thinking about the types of people that you're inviting and your goals to really be able to determine what your event format is. So for example, you know, an intimate fireside chat with a panel might not necessarily be the right choice for a larger group of audience who might be really athletic and might want to do a fun run as part of their event. So just really be thinking about what is the right event format for your specific audience. So keeping that in mind is something that's important. Something that's equally as important is your date. What time of year will this event be hosted? Does it compete with any other events that are happening in the city? Another thing to think about. Not only are we sometimes can be very hyper focused on our event for our specific district or business, but really we have to think holistically about all of those other great events that are happening in the city at the same time so that we don't necessarily compete with them. So that's something to think about. And my last and favorite note about the date is, will you have the bandwidth during this time to put on the event? It is so often exciting, for example, to put on events during the holiday season, which you absolutely should be celebrating the season and putting on events, but just something to keep in mind is, hey, with everything that's happening during the holidays, do I have the bandwidth to put on this event and really be able to allow it and to shine, you know? So something really key to think about is, you know, are you able to do this event? So keeping in mind your kind of strategic marketing calendar as well. All right, next up is the time. What time of day makes sense for this event? How long should it be? And how long can you keep your audience really engaged with you? These are all really important considerations when thinking about the time. And Also, how long will it take to achieve your goals? So, it might be all fun and wonderful. Sometimes events can maybe go on a little bit too long than maybe they should. So just kind of keeping in mind the time frame of the event is really important. And the location. As we talked about in our budgeting segment, location can sometimes be one of those bigger ticket items. But really something to be thinking about is, where will you be hosting this event? Keep in mind, like I mentioned, the potential cost of the venue, which you can kind of get creative. Sometimes hosting it at your specific business is the way to go, which is, a little bit less involved than maybe shutting down a street or shutting down a sidewalk. So some good things to keep in mind there. And then lastly, on this page, we have insurance and permitting. Really important to consider if this event requires additional insurance or permitting. A key piece here is to evaluate your current insurance provider. I know that many of you in your districts have insurance, which is wonderful. And if you have specific insurance questions, I would always advise going to your initial go into your plan first to be able to see what's initially covered. And there's also something that is sometimes needs to come into effect, which is that insurance rider. So something that's really simple that just kind of goes on top of your insurance policy for that specific event, which again is that rider. But I would always check with your current insurance policy before really kind of extending out elsewhere, because it's likely going to be the most cost affordable component if you were to kind of use with what you existing have. And something to look forward to is we have Allison from PBOT, who is going to be joining us specifically on an insurance and permitting events webinar upcoming in March. So all of your insurance questions will be answered in March, if not sooner. If you have specific ones, of course, feel free to reach out to the Events Hub. Any questions on these many graphics that we have on this specific slide, or do people feel confident kind of going on to the next one? Okay, we'll just cruise on. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, which is good. Okay, let's talk about activities and activations. This is the real fun stuff. Activities and activations should be experiential and fun, something to keep your audience engaged. So this is where you kind of get that freedom of creation and creativity to really be able to come up with some innovative things for your activities and activations. So, maybe it's kind of an afternoon fair type event, and you have cornhole, and you have maybe a magician and some street performers. So thinking of things that are really engaging for your audience and to keep their attention and focus on you and on the event. Our next thing here is promotion and marketing. Use what you already have. I cannot emphasize this enough, is use what you already have and is accessible to you to amplify and promote your message first and foremost. So some examples of these items might be newsletters, press releases. I know Venture Portland, we send out 2 e-blasts a week to make sure everyone's all informed and the latest and greatest, but something to really be thinking about again are your e-blasts. Data is money. Something that Gabby and I like to say a lot is, having those contacts really important to be able to share that message to. And social media, an absolute must. We are here, it is 2022, we are talking about social media. And, if you don't have a specific platform that you feel the most comfortable with, that's okay, because there are so many other platforms out there that you can use to amplify your message. Something that I will reflect back on is Liz Smith, who joined us earlier today. She actually hosted several specific webinars on social media over the last year, and all of those are actually recorded and again on our YouTube channel. So if you have any specific questions about any of the social media platforms, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, Reels, oh my goodness, I know that can be a little bit intimidating, but Liz does a wonderful job going into depth into each of those social media platforms. So if you are interested in brushing up on your social media skills, I certainly invite you to check out all of those great webinars hosted by Liz. And some other things to think about here is your website. I mean, that is something, yay, Liz! That is something that is really accessible to you. Again, something that you have your hands already in and can easily just add, you know, a calendar invite, or not an invite, but a calendar on, maybe you have a widget on your website, or just having it on your website front and center is something really, really important. Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Liz, very helpful for especially your Woodstock Gives Back online contests and events that you had that were very engaging, that I believe are up on the St. John's blog. Oh, perfect. Oh, YouTube. Excellent. Thank you, Kathy. All right, and then the next thing here is the run of show. So we've already talked about, you know, kind of what is this events brief, and really kind of the who, the what, the where, the why, the how, but really this run of show is a detailed iteration of what you'll be doing for the day of the event. Now, not every event needs a run of show. For example, your agenda for a board meeting kind of is that placeholder for that run of show, but something to really be thinking about in regards to really putting all of those details into that play-by-play for the run of show is going to be very critical in ensuring that your event runs seamlessly. And then last but not least, for the events brief, we have a backup plan. Things happen, and they happen more often than not, especially things that we don't know for sure happening, especially, you know, Gabby, as she spoke to the budget and what kind of remnant you might want to keep in there for the day of the event. We also want to be thinking of how can we be planning effectively for those what ifs, right? You know, what if it rains? What if we don't have enough supplies? It's always important to try to be as proactive as possible. And also, you know, hindsight is 2020. So we're always and constantly learning, which goes back to the Nelson Mandela quote of, I never lose, I either win and have a great event, or I learn, which is also one of Venture Portland's values of the Japanese culture of the art of constant improvement, which is Kaizen, something that we all exemplify at Venture Portland. And I empower you to do both, whether it be in your professional life, while planning an event, or just in your personal life. Just know that we are all human, things happen, and you can only plan for so much. With that being said, though, Gabby mentioned that she has some great experience over at the Slabtown Outdoor Market, and I'd love to bring Gabby back on to share a little bit about some experiences that she had, that she tried to be proactive about, and then she was able to learn for best practices moving forward for next time.
Yeah, so pretty much as event facilitators, we are problem solvers. So when, for instance, the Slabtown Outdoor Market, which went super fine during the summertime, but once it hit November, we encountered a lot of different weather problems. The rain was one, but we did not estimate how windy it would be. So one affair, we had our beautiful white tents all set up, all the vendors had the pieces, but once the tents were up, the wind truly just made them like kites, and they would take off, and that was dangerous for the guest safety. It was dangerous for the vendors. Their products could get destroyed. Obviously, it was a bad look. But we just did not have adequate amounts of tent weights to go around for the wind. So all we had left was string. And, you know, with quick thinking, I was able to tether a tent to a car and to a bench and to a tree. And it didn't look as streamlined as it would have if we had more tent weights, but it prevented the worst of the weather blunder, and it's, you know, it kept the event running. And similarly, just another Slabtown hiccup, there weren't supposed to be any cars parked on the street, and for the first two events it went great, but in the third event I showed up at 9 a.m. before the vendors arrived, and there were cars parked on the street. So it was my responsibility to call the tow trucks and, you know, play that role so that before the vendors even arrived, I could get that street cleared. So really putting on whatever hat you have to in order to make sure that the event keeps going forward, and then taking that last bit of the Nelson Mandela quote to learn how to prevent it from happening like that again next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gabby. Those are two really great examples of things that could very well happen to you when planning events. So I love kind of, again, the emphasis on the art of constant improvement and really being able to learn along the way. That's what kind of saves some time and effort, especially as you kind of do more and more events. It's important to learn and be better kind of for next time. So perfect. Thank you so much, Gabby. All right, most valuable resource. This is kind of a fun one. If anyone can kind of guess what that worm means, feel free to do so in the chat. I'll give you just about 10 seconds if anyone can guess what one of your most valuable resources is. This is kind of silly, but I thought I'd throw it in there anyway. But valuable resource is your time. Early bird gets the worm. Yes, I know. Thank you, Gabby. Yes. So we recommend trying to plan about 3 or 4 months out for any given event. However, that's not always realistic. So as much time as you can, be sure to give yourself that allotted time to be able to plan successfully for your event. And Liz Smith over here, she says volunteers. I wish I had a volunteer icon over there as well. But Liz, did you want to share just a brief moment of why volunteers are so important and really kind of the backbone to your event?
Yeah, so in addition to being in the St. John's Boosters, I'm actually also on the committee that does the St. John's Bazaar. So that's a big event. And our volunteers are what keep our event going. They sell our merchandise, they manage our stages, they manage like you were talking about, the customer experience. They are the front facing face of the event. So the event doesn't happen without them, and they actually sort of create the culture of the event by how they interact with people. So yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And being able, Gabby said a point of being able to treat your volunteers with the utmost respect and making them sure that they feel involved is really important as well. So thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate that. All right, before we move on to any questions, I really wanted to thank each and every one of you for your time. I can't believe we're already coming up almost on the hour here. It goes by so quickly, but I hope you learned something new and something that you can apply when planning your next event or activation. If any of you have any specific questions here, let me put here. We do have our Events Hub email address there that you can email us with specific questions. And also we just launched our Venture Portland Events Hub Instagram, which is separate, but also the same as Venture Portland's main account. So please, if you haven't already, feel free to give us a follow. We will be posting all things events related, especially as we get the Events Hub launched. And then we'll also be having office hours, really, which means anytime during the week from 9 to 5, Gabby and I are here. We are a resource for you, and we would love, absolutely love, to help you put on your next event. Any questions? Well, we have this question slide up here and ready to go. I'd love to hear any thoughts or questions, feedback. Jacob, you raised your hand. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, thanks for the info. Great presentation. I know that you mentioned that you should really start planning an event 3 to 4 months in advance, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on when you should start marketing the event. So when do you make that public? If you make it public too early, will people kind of forget about it? Or if you wait too long, you won't give them enough time and their schedules will be full? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great thing. Once you have those key components of the events brief solidified, kind of all the considerations that we talked about today, especially the who, what, where, when, why, kind of those top 5 or 6 things, then's really the time to market. And I recommend a pretty aggressive marketing calendar as far as who you want to be able to market to first, how you're marketing to them. I almost would say the earlier the better, just to kind of of tease it out there and get people excited. So as soon as you have your ducks in the row, I would share kind of the ducks with your friends and those who you wrote down as part of your list of invitees. So it's never too early, especially if you have everything buttoned up and ready to go. But great question. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to add that one of the things that we offer at the Events Hub is marketing and promotion assistance. We've been working hard to make connections with local news outlets, all of your sources that are going to help promote your event, and each individual outlet has kind of its own strategy, its own person that and then we can help with sort of connecting those two pieces together so that depending on what scale your event is, you do get an adequate strategy, especially if you want to loop in video production or anything fancy. You definitely can have a well-rounded marketing approach, especially with a lot of time in advance.
Yes, that's why kind of the benefit of having it be earlier, the better. And Bridget, fellow event expert extraordinaire, let's hear
Thank
from
you. And I always love it when somebody will edit my marketing materials or at least do a quick proofread. Are you guys up for that kind of thing?
We're absolutely up for it.
Oh,
We
we
would love
love
to
you.
have eyes.
We love you. I've always coached a lot of the groups on the idea of marketing internally and externally, so that even before you have your all 5 where, when, and why, certainly, you know, why, you really want to focus internally right away. Don't wait.
Absolutely.
Get those ideas out there. And then that external marketing comes as you can kind of define some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Bridget. And thanks for using your hand raise. I'm always impressed when people use the emoji, so thank you. Well, perfect. Well, lastly, I wanted to remind everyone that next week we have another events webinar with very own Bridget Bayer over here, author, local event expert, as she guides us through practical tools for successful events for both individuals and for business district associations alike. We'll look at experience marketing techniques and elevate ordinary events by focusing on sensory input, strengthening relationship through partnerships, and targeted promotions that turn customers into lifelong loyal patrons that will sustain your business over time. So thank you, Jacob, for putting a sign-up sheet there. Any other last questions that you have in regards to Events 101?
Let me just say that I'm really wanting to help Venture Portland in any of the events that you guys are setting up, planning, not doing, planning, okay? All about the planning. I've got a couple books out. And so if you want, there's a 20% discount available to anybody with the Venture Portland connection. You don't even have to be a Venture Portland member, but that would be ideal. So I'm putting it in the chat, and the code is VP2022. So it's 20% off any of the books or materials.
Oh,
You
Bridget,
might want.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so generous. Definitely look out for those
That
books,
up for a
ladies
few
and
months.
gentlemen. They're very, very helpful. They're wonderful resources, especially as it pertains to Portland-specific events. I think it speaks volumes to the specificity of Portland and kind of the uniqueness that we have. So perfect. Thank you so much. Well, any other final questions while we have everyone in the room today? All right. Well, thank you. Everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll catch you next week at the same place, the same time for a special presentation from Bridget. All right. Thank you, everyone.